Hello and welcome to this executive summary lecture on knowledge workers, living and working in the information age. There have been three major stages of human social and economic development, and each of these stages has been associated with certain tools that played a key role in each stage. The first age of social economic development was the agricultural age or agrarian age, which began around the 4th millennium BC, about 6,000 years ago. That's roughly the time, according to anthropologists, that human beings began using metal tools as opposed to stones and bones and sticks as tools of choice. The use of these metal tools allowed individuals and groups to grow more food than they needed for just their own survival, and that created opportunities to begin creating wealth and bartering and trade. It also created the opportunity for people to begin living in cities and communities, which was the beginning of civilization. So we started to see, because of tools, the growing of food being that basic need, the opportunity for a richer life. So I might be growing corn, but I might trade my excess corn for somebody else's meat because they're raising animals, or somebody else is raising wheat, or whatever it is. We can begin to see this idea of a modern civilization based around agriculture and the tools that support agriculture. The second wave of human societal and economic development began in the mid 18th century, around 1750 or so, with tools again playing a key role. This is, of course, during the time of the Industrial Revolution, and the tools associated with the Industrial Revolution, steam engines and manufacturing devices. This allowed for machine-based efforts to replace and be more efficient than the manual labor previously done by humans and animals. And if we still had humans and animals doing work, they were aided by the Industrial Revolution machines, and they were more efficient. Now, you could spend an entire semester discussing the Industrial Revolution, and I'm sure that many people have in the past. It's beyond the scope of our discussion right now, or at any point in this area, to talk about the Industrial Revolution at length. But just realize that from an economic perspective, both the farm and the factory were primary drivers of economic growth during that second wave, the industrial wave. The third wave of human societal and economic development is the information age, with job opportunities associated with the production and the selling of information-based goods and services. There are around you now, there are more of these kinds of jobs and opportunities than you realize. From service perspective, not a tangible good, but a service perspective, information age jobs would include things like television and movies and entertainment, video and music, comedians, whatever it is. These are all forms of information services rather than crops or physical goods created from a factory. Professional services, as part of this information age, would include jobs like legal and banking and insurance and market research, and those are just a few examples. But if you realize there are lots and lots of these jobs that, again, are not based on a farm and are not based on a factory, but are rather based on manipulating and working with information, proprietary information or public information. And they're all information-intensive jobs. Now, there are, of course, manufacturing jobs related to the information age, where you're building the physical devices to use to create the technology, the information tools, the transistors and the circuit boards that combine together to give us the components of our computers and our network devices, or the handheld devices, smartphones and tablets, just as a few of the examples of the tangible devices. The role of business itself is heavily impacted by the opportunities of using technology and information for a competitive business advantage. So this chart shows a summary of the information age versus the agrarian and industrial age. Of course, there are still lots of people who work on farms, and there are still lots of people who work on factories, but generally speaking, fewer people do those jobs, farm and factory jobs, and the main job growth areas are in the areas of information goods and services. This chart summarizes those three ages, those three categories: the tools, the business opportunities, the key assets, supporting infrastructure, the primary outputs of each. Across the bottom is the main identifying activity. And at risk of oversimplifying, right, the agrarian age can be thought of in terms of growing things, industrial age making things, and the information age being problem solving. It's important to understand that fewer people are working on farms, even though people still work farms, and fewer people are working on factories, even though people still work factories. Those who do work on farms or work in factories are making use of modern technology tools to be more efficient than the farmers and the factory workers from years past. The newest and most innovative jobs are going to be related to the information age. It makes sense, therefore, that you have an understanding of what is involved with being a knowledge worker in the information age. Now, it's important to realize that everyone uses knowledge to do their job. Farmers have extensive knowledge about planting and growing and harvesting and selling their crops. Factory workers have extensive knowledge about the tools and the machines they use to do their job. So it's not an insult, or I'm certainly not saying it this way, and you would be wrong to take it as an insult to say that a farmer or a factory worker is not a knowledge worker or an information age worker. They clearly have knowledge and information. There's no jobs where a significant amount of knowledge is not necessary to do the job. But it's a difference in the information age from those areas in a variety of ways. We are right now in the early to middle stages of the societal impact of the information age, and it's difficult to say for sure what those changes will be, but we know they're coming and we need to be prepared. I like this quote from Barack Obama. Early in his tenure, he said that, talking about education, it says, we need to be preparing our students for the 21st century economy. There's a strong understanding that whatever lies ahead is going to be different than what we did in the past, and we need to be mindful of that and prepared for that. So information age knowledge worker jobs are different and more diverse than farm or factory jobs. Information age jobs are based on understanding and using the appropriate knowledge at the appropriate time. Architects build buildings, but every single building is unique. Unlike a factory worker who may be building widgets as the classic example, a nonsensical pretend example, and all the widgets are the same. In fact, in a manufacturing standpoint, you want things to be identical. You want them to be interchangeable and not unique. Information age jobs, everything's a little different, everything's a little bit separate. Lawyers argue cases, but each and every case is unique. Doctors treat patients, but each and every patient is unique. The ongoing changing nature seems to be one of those key characteristics of the knowledge involved with information age jobs, as opposed to farm and factory work, which are knowledge intensive, of course, but the knowledge does not change very much from year to year, and certainly not from day to day. I personally am a big fan of Neil deGrasse Tyson. I enjoy watching him on television. He's on Nova, on PBS Nova. He's an astrophysicist that does a lot of their programming there. He speaks on late night shows a lot, particularly those on Comedy Central. Even though he's not a comedian, he gets along very well with late night shows on Comedy Central. He's written a number of books, which I recommend, especially if you have a science background or interest. He's somebody that I would recommend reading. And Neil deGrasse Tyson is also someone I follow on Twitter, and a year or so ago he made this tweet, and I thought it was very interesting, so I captured it and said I want to talk about this in class. And here was what the student said. So I'm halfway through my first semester at Penn State studying physics and astronomy. Any words of advice, because Newton is throwing all he has at me, talking about Newton's 3 laws, objects in motion, and everything else about Newtonian physics in this introductory physics class. And Neil deGrasse Tyson says, physics is not about knowledge, but understanding. Physics problem sets are not designed for you to learn the exact problem given, but to change the wiring of your brain, leaving you thinking more deeply about the operations of the natural world. In other words, what I think Neil deGrasse Tyson is saying to this student is, don't worry so much about getting the right answer to a homework problem. Don't worry so much about the facts and memorizing the facts. Go through the process, embrace the process of thinking like a scientist, embrace the process of understanding the physical world and how objects impact other objects and how force and mass and those issues work together, and creating assumptions about the world around you because of what you're learning in the classroom. You want to think deeply about those subjects. That kind of illustrates the idea of a knowledge worker mentality. The fact that it's not the facts that you need to be comfortable with, it's the processes, it's the way that things relate to other things, because every day there's a new opportunity, there's a new issue, there's a new situation that you want to become aware of. There is a constant sense of excitement, would be one way of saying it. It might even be overwhelmingness of keeping up with information, but there is this constant sense of change, as opposed to farming, as opposed to factory work, where there's potentially some comfort in the fact that what you're doing tomorrow and a month from now and 5 months from now is pretty much what you're doing today. You kind of know, or what you did this time last year, or you did this time 10 years ago. But understanding the deep causes, understanding the real issues, so that you can make the right conclusions at the end, that's the advice that Neil deGrasse Tyson had for this student studying physics, and I think it's good advice for all students in all of their coursework. It's not focus on getting the right answer, but focus on changing your thinking, the way your brain looks at problems, and therefore the way your brain determines solutions. Okay, so our last slide in this executive lecture is to keep in mind the fact that the word worker is critical to the phrase. Everybody uses knowledge, and it's an insult to somebody to say, well, I'm a knowledge worker and you're not, as if to say you don't have any knowledge. What knowledge workers do is they do things with their knowledge. Doctors and lawyers and engineers and managers and farmers and teachers and sales professionals, everybody does things with their knowledge. But the key to being, I know I have farmers in that list, but even farmers today are using technology, and factory workers are using technology, and they are having to change. If you're changing as a farmer, and the way you farm this year is different than last year because you're using new innovation technologies, then you're a knowledge worker working on a farm. If you're working in a factory, and if what you do in the factory this year is different than what you did last year because new technology is being involved and incorporated into your factory job, then you're a knowledge worker working in a factory. Your mindset is that you want to be mentally engaged at all times in what you're doing. You can't kind of shut your brain off and go through things in routine. That's not what knowledge workers do. They're always mentally engaged. They're always doing things differently over time. That constant sense of change, I think, is a key thing to keep in mind when you think about the role of a knowledge worker. And how do you prepare yourself to become an outstanding knowledge worker in the 21st century? You become an expert in the field of your choice. Whatever it is you care about, you need to become one of the most knowledgeable people in the world on that area. You should be reading books and reading magazines and hands-on experiments and talking with people who have similar interests, and just being as immersed in that discipline area as possible, so that you can be as knowledgeable and as much of an expert as you possibly can be in that area, whatever that area is. Because you don't know what problem you're going to be solving tomorrow and next week and next year in that field, but the more knowledge you have relevant to your career, your interest, your job, the more successful you would be. And this student sent me this quote at one point a year or two ago, and I really liked it, so I kept it. I thought it was nice, and I'm sharing this with you as the last thing. The student said this to me: an information worker is someone who is constantly learning in their new job, constantly learning. Information workers are people like doctors, lawyers, real estate agents, and teachers. They are always there are always new things to learn in these professions, and I agree with that. There are always new things to learn in whatever your profession is. I consider myself, the student says, an information worker, because even though my goal is the same every day, There are always new ways of doing the same thing. I am learning something new every day, and I'm sure it will not slow down. And I like that that student sees his or her job that way, as an opportunity to learn new things every day. And I hope and encourage you to be doing the same thing.